Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the show. In today's episode, I'm going to be interviewing Lael Petersen, and we're going to be talking about how to create some structure and routines for ourselves in this interesting times that we find ourselves living in, with many of us being sheltering in place and at home. So I just want to share a little bit of her bio, and then we'll bring her on. So Lael is a mindset and habits coach who helps women achieve their goals of living a healthier and more purposeful life. She combines her experience as a mental health therapist with the ancient healing traditions of yoga and Ayurveda. Through her own recovery from addiction and cancer, she realized women needed more than a space to talk about their problems. They needed practical and holistic strategies to prioritize their health and their personal goals. Her professional experience and down-to-earth style make her coaching programs practical, fun, and transformative. So I'm really excited to have this conversation with her and to share some of her wisdom with you now. Let's welcome her to the show. So welcome to the show. I'm so excited for our conversation.
Me too.
Great. Well, first, I just like to have people share a little bit about their story. And reading your bio, it sounds like you really came into the work that you do through an interesting path. So would you share just a little bit about why you do what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So I spent 18 years as a therapist, and I worked with children and youth and parents.
Mm-hmm.
And it was during that time, especially when I was at the later ends of my years working with adult women, that I started to realize that people needed help with more than just talking about their problems. And so I would try to get them connected with a personal trainer or a dietitian, or take this yoga class, or, go to meditation. And it was really challenging for them. I knew that they would be feeling so much better if they were taking care of their bodies, and their self-care habits in a different way, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it was about that same time that I got diagnosed with cancer myself. And that really led me into exploring a lot of my own healing. I was seeing my own therapist, but also started seeing an energy worker, and my fairly regular practice of yoga took on a whole different purpose at that time. And when I came out of that, I realized I did not want to just keep what had happened for me during that time in terms of my own healing to myself.
Yes.
So it took me about a year to figure out how I was going to combine therapy and yoga and self-care habits, and how I was going to do this. And long story short, I ended up getting trained as a yoga teacher, and taught for a while, realized that's not what it was, and then discovered it really was Ayurveda and coaching. And so I transitioned from seeing women one-on-one in a therapeutic setting to teaching and hosting and leading groups. And it's been really powerful.
It sounds like it for sure. And I definitely resonate a little bit with your story
I
of
know you can.
going through your own process, and I call it kind of opening up the treasure trove of like all of these different things I didn't even know existed, before. And it's like, how can I keep these goodies to myself? I have to start to share this because it felt so empowering to me.
Yes. Very similar for me too. I just couldn't sit and do cognitive behavioral therapy anymore and not be talking about the energy body and daily rhythm and the physical body. It just wasn't going to work anymore.
Yeah, and that was part of why I wanted a psychology degree, but I knew I didn't want to do traditional therapy. I
Right.
wanted, because the body is more interesting to me, or the complete being, because the mind is, of course, important too, but I just didn't feel like there could be that disconnection between, let's just talk about the problems. It's like, well, what about your body?
Totally. Yep. That's exactly where I was too, Lynn.
Beautiful. Well, I'm glad we kind of share a similar story and similar journey. So we find ourselves kind of in this interesting time period, right? We're all in this kind of shelter in place, stay at home, living with the coronavirus happening right now. And I know for a lot of people, it's really unsettling.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like our routine and our normal has kind of gone out the window. And we're trying still to find, even though for many of us, it's been, at least a month, maybe almost two,
Yeah.
we're still kind of trying to figure this out. So I thought it would be really helpful to talk a little bit more about routine and how can we
Yeah.
find that. So, do you have any suggestions for people right now that are struggling with how do you get into the new normal of being at home and not having all of those external things?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's important for people to understand my perspective draws on the ancient wisdom of Ayurveda.
Mm-hmm.
And Ayurveda means the science of life. It's the sister science to yoga for the people who don't understand. So, um, and Ayurveda teaches us that one of the main causes of disease is living out of rhythm and living out of rhythm with nature.
Mm-hmm.
And so if people can start understanding that their body has a natural rhythm,
Mm-hmm.
much like we witness in nature, springtime and fall too are really, really beautiful times for people to understand, like, oh yeah, there's this cyclical thing that happens in nature and we
Right.
can see it, right?
Right. Things come back to life, budding out right now. It's such a
Yes.
beautiful time to just watch nature.
And it will also come to end,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like there's another phase that happens. And so if we can begin to understand that our own bodies have that same rhythm, that
Mm-hmm.
we are made of the same thing, right? We're not separate from nature. We're just another manifestation of nature.
Mm-hmm.
And when we can begin to understand our own body rhythm, then it becomes easier to sort of align with what our bodies really want.
Mm-hmm.
And routine and predictability are really important for
Mm-hmm.
the anxious mind, right? For the
Yes.
restless body.
Yes.
So when people are struggling right now with, I don't know what day of week it is, right? Or
What
I don't
month
know
is
what,
it? I don't
right,
know.
right. Like, did I shower yesterday or was that 2 days ago?
Right.
And they're feeling out of sorts in their mind, right? One of my invitations to people is to really start thinking about how can you build in some of that routine and predictability in your body.
Mm-hmm.
And this often gets confused with some sort of strict schedule of events. And I say, if you look around, you'll notice that the lilac started blooming, right? But the clematis is already done. And the dog, everybody's got their own timing, right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
so for us humans, we have that as well. Like we might be more inclined to wake up at 5 a.m., someone else might be more inclined at 7 a.m. But just understanding that there's a flow to the day that could be really grounding, I think is
Mm-hmm.
valuable for people.
Mm-hmm. I've been noticing like this week, like I typically my alarm is set for 7:30. I'm not an early morning person. And even this
Right,
week, it's like my body's been like, no, I think we need more like 8:30. Like I just need a
right.
slow start to the day. And I've just been kind of luckily can honor that now,
Yes,
just
yes,
okay, I'll just change the alarm time and let myself just rest in the morning.
absolutely, absolutely. So I think what's key for people is to understand that your body has a rhythm and that when you can align to your natural rhythm, you will feel a lot better.
Mm-hmm.
What's challenging is that we don't have our, like I like to think about the bumpers in a bowling alley. We don't have our external bumpers right now,
Mm,
right? Like we don't have the time that I need to be at work, or the kids come home at this time, or I have this appointment, right? Like a lot of our bumpers are gone. And so
right.
we're just sort of like out there
Free floating
free
kind of.
floating, right?
Which is yeah, it's beautiful and weird at the same time.
Well, it was fun for like the first 2 weeks.
Yeah,
And
and
this
now
is
it's
what
kind
I
of like
noticed is
yeah.
that people were like, oh, goody, we get to like have a stay at home vacation.
Right.
But now the living out of rhythm is really starting to take its toll. The anxiety is wearing off, and people are like settling into a little more depressive sort of
Mhm.
conversations and this like concern, how long is this going to go on?
Right.
So the need for some bumpers or anchors, I like to call them, in your life are really important to keep
Mhm.
your body operating smoothly and also to keep your mind from going all the places.
Mhm. For sure. Yeah, it can get, our brains can get, I think, particularly, anxious about all of those questions of, what does this mean? How long is it going to last?
For sure.
What's the long-term impact going to be for me and my family and for those I care about?
Yes. What's challenging, I think, for people to remember is that you can't always fight the mind with the mind.
Hmm.
Meaning, some people say, well, just don't worry about that stuff, or just think about other positive things. And while I don't disagree that mindset work is really valuable and kind of watching what you're telling yourself is important,
Hmm.
oftentimes the mind is too powerful in these moments.
Yes.
And working with the body has a much more profound effect, right? So I tell
Hmm.
people, don't worry about whether you're still anxious about your kids' mental health or what's going to happen with the elections or whatever it is. Just start working with the body, right?
Hmm.
And then the body will talk to the mind, and then they will be in communion and things will calm down. So if you can get your body living in rhythm,
Hmm.
right, then the mind will calm down.
Hmm.
That's what I encourage people. And then you can work on your mindset and your positive thinking or whatever affirmations, whatever works for you, right?
Hmm.
But to do that without sort of figuring out the body rhythm piece, I think is making it harder than it needs to be.
Yes. Yeah. So how, kind of to dive a little deeper into that, how do we kind of work with the body rhythm? Like what are some ways that we can kind of practically approach that if somebody's going, okay, that sounds good, but I'm
Yeah.
not quite sure. What do I do?
Yeah, great. Well, in Ayurveda and what I teach people is a daily rhythm of yogis. And I remember the yogis of back in the day were not necessarily interested in having longer hamstrings or um, tight abs.
Yes.
They were interested in enlightenment.
Hmm.
And so they recognized that practicing and living in a certain way allowed them to be more clear about who they were and their true purpose. So I give that context to let you know that that's where Ayurveda is drawing from.
Hmm.
And in Ayurveda, we understand that there are certain ways, right, to live in rhythm that will help you feel better in your body and your mind. And one of them is to understand that you have a circadian rhythm and
Hmm.
that you have a body clock that
Right.
would prefer you to be asleep by 10 and awake by sunrise. So
Hmm.
aligning with sunrise and sunset, right?
Hmm.
And then also understanding that your digestive system has a clock and
Hmm.
that your digestive fire is hottest when the sun is the highest, even if it's hidden behind the clouds.
Hmm.
So eating your largest meal in the middle of the day and keeping dinner something more supplemental,
Hmm.
something lighter to kind of tide you over till breakfast.
Hmm.
And then
That's a big
understand,
one, I think, for people is we're used to eating our big meals in the evening in Western society, right?
right. But only in about the last 80 years.
Mm,
If we go back, we'll see that our grandparents and our great grandparents and our great great grandparents, they ate their largest meal in the middle of the day. And
mm,
many cultures all over the world still do.
right.
That they take a pause in the middle of the day, they gather together, right? They might take a siesta or a rest or a
Right.
walk, and then they resume some work. And then dinner is sort of like, yeah, let's have a little something. But it isn't this thing we got marketed around, like if you're not making an elaborate meal at 7 o'clock with all your hungry teenagers when everybody's exhausted and then eating the majority of your calories and then wondering why you don't feel well after doing that for
Right.
10 or
Because you're going to
15
go
or
lay
20
down.
years. The body can't deal with it.
Yeah.
Okay, so without getting too deep into why and how that works, there are just some simple habits like getting to bed a little earlier, right? Noticing your fatigue is really showing up probably if you're paying attention and not eating heavy, it's probably showing up around 9:30 or 10,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you stay up past 10, you'll get your second wind. There's a different energy that kicks in at 10 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
and it is designed to help our bodies clean house at night.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but if we're awake when that happens, it feels like a surge of energy, and so
Yes.
we think like, oh, I'm awake now.
Yes. Yeah.
And so essentially the body never really gets to do its reboot. um, and that takes its toll over time. That might be fine if you need to like get ready for a big move or you have something big at work and you got to pull a couple of those. But if you live chronically with a
Mm-hmm.
second wind for years and years and years, it'll take its toll.
Mm-hmm.
So an earlier lighter dinner, maybe earlier to bed.
Mhm.
Another one that I love is moving in the morning.
Yes.
And I don't mean like you need to do some sort of beach body hit workout, right? Like if you're into that, that's awesome. But I'm just talking about like breathing, stretching, sort of
Mhm.
waking up the energy body before you turn on the computer or look at your phone.
Yes.
So back, when we go back to the daily rhythm of yogis, that would have looked traditionally like a sun salutation practice. That sort of
Mhm.
classic sun salutation that we've seen in yoga classes before.
Mhm.
For you, that might not be what you want to do. You might decide to just do some stretches at the kitchen sink, or you might love your morning walk, but essentially inviting you to do something with your body before you hand it over to the news of the day.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree with that. Yeah. Sometimes easier said than done, but that's definitely something I try to do is have kind of my morning routine of like a nice calm breakfast, doing some movement,
Yeah,
meditating, and then it's like, okay, now it's time to open
right,
up the computer. And
right. Like get things in alignment before we turn it over to the mind. Because once the mind's on board, right, it will start its story about all kinds of things, whether it's worried or whether
Mhm.
it's upset about something, or
Right.
which the mind is great for a lot of things, but sometimes it's more helpful to kind of get the other pieces of our body aligned before that happens.
Definitely, yeah, not seeing the news before you're kind of like
Nope.
fully present in your body, because then your
Yep.
brain is going to take off and go, on its own
Totally.
process with all of that. Let's worry about this. Let's worry about that.
Right. The other thing I encourage people to do is think about setting little like road signs for yourself or anchors throughout the day. And I'm
Hmm.
hearing a lot of really interesting ones from people I work with. Um, some people have said like, well, I'm meeting with my family for lunch at noon, regardless of where we are. So my partner's in the basement in working, and I've been here, and the kids are doing their thing, but we all gather at noon for 30 minutes.
Hmm.
Or some people have said like, I'm always having a phone conversation or a Zoom call with a girlfriend, between 4 and 5 a couple nights a week.
Hmm.
There's these small things, or I'm listening to that favorite podcast at this certain time. So instead of having our external lives providing that structure, right,
Hmm.
that we used to have, people are beginning to find the things that kind of mark the time and mark the day.
Hmm.
And I think that's really valuable. You could, think of anything that is useful for you that could
Hmm.
help you sort of mark time and day. But I think those things have provided that little bit of structure, and not so rigid that there isn't room to be tired one day, or maybe feel a burst of energy and want to do some closet cleaning or whatever.
Yes.
Right, but kind of aiming to hit those markers throughout the day can really provide the rhythm that the body needs and that the mind really needs as well.
Yeah, I think that's great advice, and, great advice about being flexible too, because obviously this is an interesting experience. And some days it's like, oh, we're just really tired and we just need more space to just be with that. And some days it's like,
Yes.
yeah, I feel like I could just, clean the house and have plenty of energy and I'm up. So
Right.
just everyone learning to be kind of more patient, which I hope is something that, we can carry forward too. We learn how to be a little more honoring of our bodies instead of just the schedule driving us all the
Yes.
time.
Yes. Well, it's interesting, Lynn, because I hear this from a lot of women that they don't really trust their own knowing. Like they don't really know if they're supposed to push themselves through something or if
Mhm.
they're supposed to honor their feelings, right? Like,
Mhm.
am I supposed to push through this quote unquote lazy feeling I'm having? Right? Is this laziness or is this fatigue?
Mhm.
And I think that's an important thing for people to wrestle with,
Mhm.
um, because at some point that becomes very valuable to be able to know, like, like you said, do I need an extra hour of sleep this morning, or
Mhm.
would it really be better for me to get up and take a walk before I work, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, and
Exactly.
I
And
think it
that's
just takes some practice to explore like what's working for you, and some real honesty with like what's your tendency.
mhm.
Right? Are you a tendent to lay on the couch and, numb out with Netflix and wine? Or is your
Right.
tendency to push, 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 go, 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 and kind of avoid?
True. Yeah. And for me, like in the morning, it's like, okay, is this just like a feeling of depression? Because depression can also make us just want to like stay in bed and not
Sure.
be motivated. Or is this just genuinely my body's like, I could just use some space right now and some gentleness. So it's a good way, I think, for us to start to learn to read those things more
Right.
instead of just jumping to whatever the default is of
Yes.
whether that's, oh, this is me being lazy, or maybe I do need to push myself today because it is
Totally.
a depression kind of just kicking in, and that movement, that exercise would help move me out of that.
Yeah. This is where Ayurveda is so valuable, I think, um, because there really is one human rhythm.
Mm-hmm.
We're all connected. And so when you begin to learn that body rhythm, then you begin to see in your own self, like where you fit into that, right? Like, am I an early bloomer? Like, do I rise at 5 a.m. because that's when I feel the best? Or
Never
am
been
I
me.
right? Or am I a late bloomer where I really do better if I wake up a little later, right?
Yeah.
And so it can be difficult for people to figure out what works for them when they're trying on everybody else's clothes, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I hear this from women a lot. Well, I tried, long distance running, and then I tried this, and then I tried this thing, and I've, done this stuff. But what's I think so beautiful about Ayurveda is that it's universal. And
Mm-hmm.
so once you just sync up with it, then it provides that really lovely anchor for you to figure out, like, oh, that's what's universal, and this is how I manifest that.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
It totally makes
Okay.
sense. And kind of that difference between the early and the late riser. It's like I remember for years fighting against that. Even like as a teenager, I just needed more sleep than most people, and I always have.
Yes.
And then the school schedule was always like, okay, you have to get up at this time, even though my body was like, I think I get my deepest sleep from maybe 5 to 7 a.m., maybe
Yeah.
4 to 7 a.m. If you're forcing me to get up before that, it feels like I've been robbed of that time when I fall into my deepest sleep, and that's
Yeah.
just always been my rhythm.
Yeah.
But
You know,
some of us could feel like we're lazy, right? Because
right.
everybody else gets up at 6 a.m. and
Absolutely.
here I am sleeping till 7:30.
I always ask people, how do you feel? And when they say, I feel great when I get 9 hours of sleep,
Mm-hmm.
and, and that's your answer. If you feel terrible when you oversleep, like that's for me, if I sleep too long, I wake up groggy, I wake up foggy. It doesn't work for me. And I naturally wake up early. So the question always is not what is somebody else doing, right? And
Mm-hmm.
trying to be like them,
Mm-hmm.
but really figuring out, like, once I understand how my body works, right? How my nervous system works, how my
Right.
digestive system works, then the question is how do you feel? Because your body will talk to you. It will let you know.
Yep. That's definitely one of the things I'm always talking about is our bodies are always talking to us, but we
Right.
most of the time are conditioned to just say that's not really important.
Or that doesn't fit the picture of what I was told.
Right. Everybody else does it this way, so I guess I'm just wrong for doing it that way. I mean, I've had people, tease me for it's like, "Oh, you could sleep 10 hours." Yeah, I can
Yeah,
sleep 10
probably could.
hours. And for some people that, like you said, that might make you groggy and sluggish.
Right.
And sometimes, I don't always feel like I need 10 hours, but sometimes my body's like, yeah, I could use 10 hours to do some deep healing sleep.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, we could go so many places with our shame about how people take care of each other or take care of themselves, right? Like
Yes.
our
Yes.
judgment about what people do.
Yes.
And again, if you feel good, right,
Mm-hmm.
and if you feel well, then it's working for you,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I
Yep.
think that's a very personal assessment we have to make, right?
Mm-hmm. And what this conversation is just making me think is this we're being given a gift in this. I think there's gifts in this experience, and that's one of them is we have time to start to figure out what feels good in our bodies in a way that without, like you said, those bumpers of like external demands. It's like, well, what does really feel good? Like, do I really like to sleep till this time? Do I really like to, work at
Yeah,
this time?
right, right. Yeah, we're getting this opportunity to take a look at what would really work for us if I
Mm-hmm.
didn't have those external demands or pressures or schedules.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting. It's one of those things that's curious to see what people will take from this time period, kind of when life shifts back to whatever it's going to shift to, and I think that's a big thing too, of just the
Yeah.
unknown of, will it go back to how it was, or how are we going to be
Right.
moving forward?
I'm thinking about this like a season, right? Uh,
Mm-hmm.
our habits change with the season. And in Ayurveda, we even change how we eat and what we eat,
Mm-hmm.
depending on the season, even how we move our bodies.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think this is an interesting season. So
Mm-hmm.
we probably won't keep what we're doing now when we move into the next season, whenever that is. But I always hope that we learn something from that experience, right? So that
Mm-hmm.
when we enter that time again, whether it's a different time of challenge, a marital challenge or something with the kids, that you can remember like what worked for me when things were crazy.
Mm-hmm.
What were those habits? I just posted this in my group today. I was like, how are you getting through?
Mm-hmm.
What's working? And so
Mm-hmm.
people were reflecting on like, well, gardening, like documentary couch time with my husband, talks with my girlfriends, green
Mm-hmm.
smoothies. Like people were just listing the things. I thought this is great because people are becoming much more aware of how they're nourishing and nurturing and caring for themselves right now.
Yes.
And they will be able to draw on that when they need to again.
That is a beautiful gift, because it is kind of like filling up that toolbox of, oh yeah, when things go kind of crazy again in a different way in life. I remember I went through that, and here's some things that helped me then.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, any other little bits of wisdom you'd like to share as far as getting through this time?
Knowing your daily rhythm or understanding your daily rhythm, getting some more sleep, right? Moving your body in the morning, and
Yes.
then finding those little anchors throughout the day that will start building your rhythm and routine.
hmm
And then don't worry about fighting the mind with the mind,
I think that's beautiful
right?
advice.
Yeah, just work with the body first. Just put the body into rhythm, right?
hmm
And the mind will calm down. You'll find, like, I'd prefer to not read news before X amount of time. I'm noticing I enjoy that morning better.
Right.
That's
Or just,
working for
yeah,
me.
I think even just the idea of, working with the body, it's like, okay, I'm feeling anxious. What does my body need? Do I
Yes.
need to just go take some deep breaths? Do I
Right.
have
Do
a
I need to
tool?
dance? Do I need to, yeah. What do
Do
I
I need
need?
to scream? Do I need to have a little tantrum?
Totally.
Because I think that's also so important, is that we let the emotions move, and we let the energy of whatever we're feeling, move. And it can feel challenging, when there's everyone in the house, to have those moments of like, I really am like needing a good cry or a good scream. I know our
Yeah.
dog is like super nurturing, and so we cry and he wants to come be with you, which is a little much. So it's like finding creative ways to just allow what needs to come out to come out.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
And we all are processing it differently. I think that's what I keep saying is, there is no one way of
Right.
how we all should feel. If you're feeling productive right now, great. If you're feeling not motivated right now, that's okay too.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Just
Totally.
listening to our wisdom.
Yeah.
Well,
Mm.
wonderful. Well, I really appreciated you taking some time today to share your wisdom and share a little bit about how we can kind of find some structure and rhythm in this time.
Mm. Thank
I,
you, Lynn.
yeah, thank you for being on the show. And I hope this was helpful for everyone listening. And I look forward to sharing with you all in the next episode. Take care, everybody.